This week, we're having a good hard look at a chant that is being heard across the land from sea to shining sea from Americans who have something to say and who aren't afraid to say it. Have a listen.
Joe Biden! Joe Biden! Joe Biden! Joe Biden! Joe Biden!
Hang on. What were they saying there? Well, we had to bleep out 1 out of every 3 words of those chants, but let me just clarify it by saying this. The people in the stands at all those games and everywhere else weren't wishing luck to Joe Biden, nor were they suggesting he was a chicken who needed to be plucked, or for that matter, commenting on his relationship with the guy who runs Facebook, a man called Mark Zuckerberg, or known to his friends as Zuck. This chant, this phenomenon has been occurring for weeks now at arenas across the country, though we have barely heard anything about it in the mainstream media. Wonder why. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that sports fans jeering politicians isn't part of life in a free country. It should be. Now, normally this show is all about blowing up media myths. Myths such as the one that says Joe Biden would absolutely be able to find his car in a parking lot. Hey, what's he doing back there anyway? But sometimes we not only have to blow up those sorts of myths, but we have to blow up cultural myths too. Myths like the one that says Australia is a free and easygoing place with a rebellious spirit that never fails to tell authority where to go. And in one sense, that's true. Australia used to be a strange, amusing, and intriguing country to migrants like me. Its contribution to world culture, sure, was not up there with, say, Italian operas, French cuisine, or American cinema, but this never bothered Australians because they were a remarkably confident and brash people.
Football, meat pies, kangaroos, and Holden cars, huh?
Right!
Well, you sure sound like Australia to me.
We are!
I'll slip an extra shrimp on the barbie for you.
Who had their own linguistic idiosyncrasies.
I grabbed the beer and said, thanks, Laura. Ta.
And customs.
You're a bloke, I'm a bloke, we're all blokes. Oh, cheers. Cheers.
And though mostly friendly, you never knew what to expect.
You know, $10 at the door and you get beat up if you're unlucky.
Especially when they were provoked.
That's not a knife. That's a knife.
But it was their love of beer and laughter that mostly defined them, as former Prime Minister Bob Hawke demonstrated when he attended a cricket match in 2012. But lately, this version of Australia seems like a foreign country. Recently, the world has been horrified to see what has been happening in Australia, which, over the course of COVID, has slid from being a robust democracy to a virtual health dictatorship. One where half the population is under some form of house arrest, including yours truly, and only allowed to leave home for very specific, authorized reasons, like talking to you. Where protesters are met with pepperball, where police on horseback patrol the beaches to make sure no one is having a good time, and kids' skate parks see concrete bollards placed across them to make sure that no one commits the crime of riding their bike. Well, what happened? It's a bit of a complicated story, but it's one that everybody should know. Part of it is that when COVID struck, we in Australia pulled up the drawbridge to keep the pandemic out. But because we got lucky with the fact that we are an island, we got complacent and decided that our good luck could go on forever. And whenever an outbreak threatened our little COVID-free idyll at the bottom of the world, our elected officials panicked. And in September, 2 Melbourne Aussie rules football fans concocted an elaborate plan to sneak illegally across state borders into Perth, Western Australia, to watch their team play in the grand final of the National Football League. They were caught, hauled before the bench, pleaded guilty, and sentenced to 10 months in prison, reduced to 3. Both will spend Christmas behind bars. But it's the response from ordinary West Australians that indicates a big change has occurred since those heady days on the Victorian goldfields in the 19th century. Now, granted, breaking quarantine rules during a pandemic is slightly more risky than protesting against a fee to pan for gold, but the vitriol directed at the Victorian footy fans didn't take into account the fact that both men had indeed tested negative for COVID. And it wasn't long ago that Australians cheered that sort of bravado, but not so much anymore.
And anyone else who's acted in that way, allegedly, are entitled, despicable criminals.
West Australians have been repeatedly reminded by the government that the state's locked border has kept them safe and kept the marauding coronavirus out of their lives and allowed them to live relatively freely, if you consider a cage 1/3 the size of Australia, freely. So their response to these two border-hopping interlopers was no less harsh, calling them offensive names and celebrating their incarceration, no less. A lot has changed in Australia during this pandemic, not least of which is that much of the population has become strangely comfortable with the ever-encroaching presence of Big Brother.
We need a ring of steel around Sydney so that this virus is not spreading.
I think it's a bit rich for New South Wales to start blaming Queensland.
We've got a chance to stop this dead in its tracks.
We suppress it and we get rid of it. That is the Australian approach.
Yes, that's it. First you frighten the people, then you comfort them with your jingoistic rhetoric. Hey, it's worked before.
COP26 menu, James.
Oh, I love this story here. So if you had any doubt that what they really are about is completely changing all of our lifestyles, everything we do, everything we eat, trading in our burgers for cricket paste and the rest, COP26 got in trouble because they served burgers and meat and things like that, which they said was like serving cigarettes at a lung cancer conference. And the funniest thing, being that this was in Scotland, was that haggis apparently had the worst climate impact of all the dishes being served. So there you go.
My name's Kirsten Hoffman. I'm a 23-year-old law student, and I just stopped a coal machine by pressing one of the buttons. So I'm also running around putting some Blockade Australia stickers on equipment, and back there, Jacinta, a mum, is locked on to this machinery to stop this coal port contributing to the climate and ecological emergency that we're currently all in.
James, come on, help me out here.
Well,
a law student,
a privileged white law student at that. I mean, if we're going to use the left's language. Now, where is Virginia Trioli, can I ask, saying, you know, if you want to make life difficult for coal miners, if you want to make life difficult for the people who work at the port, if you want to make life difficult for people who have to pay their power bills, if you want to make life difficult for people who work at places like aluminium smelters that require the electricity that is generated by this infrastructure, then, you know, that person's an idiot. But no, we won't hear that from the ABC. They'll say, oh, no, that person is saving the world. Nonsense. Well, that's it. It's done. Over. Finished. Afghanistan is lost. The Taliban is in control. Billions of dollars in American armaments are in the hands of 7th century savages, and Xi Jinping is laughing in his baiju. Now, if you're a normal person, you're probably watching all of this and saying, heck of a job, Mr. President. But if you're one of the American media who helped drag Joe Biden over the line last year and might now somewhere be feeling a tinge of regret, you're probably out there saying, heck of a job, Mr. President. Because what we are seeing play out now in real time is a classic case of the mainstream media never having to say they're sorry. And why would they? They're too busy coming up with excuses for this catastrophe. Now, if you're like me, you're probably wondering, just how will they spin their way out of this one? Or, to be more precise, on whom can they pin the blame? Well, my friends, the person to blame for all this is you. Yes, that's right. If you ever questioned the wisdom of the West's 20-year engagement in Afghanistan, even while honoring the service of our armed forces who went there, the new narrative is that, yes, you are to blame.